The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Returning from the district of Tyre, Jesus went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee, right through the Decapolis region. And they brought him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech. And they asked him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, put his finger into the man's ears, and touched his tongue with spittle. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed, and he said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And his ears were opened, and the ligament of his tongue was loosened, and he spoke clearly. And Jesus ordered them to tell no one about it, but the more he insisted, the more widely they published it. Their admiration was unbounded. He has done all things well, they said. He makes the deaf hear and the dumb speak. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together to make themselves loincloths. When I was preparing this, I thought, why do we have to have that reading at Carnival time? But you see, to understand the various directions that we could take, not just at Carnival time, not just in the horrible murders, rapes, and forms of violence that we have seen taking place. It's not a time to blame. It's not Adam and Eve to blame. It's not the killers to blame. I believe that we find an answer to the behavior that we see around us in the 7 deadly sins: lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. But we get an even bigger hint in the book of Genesis in today's reading from chapter 3, when we recognize that not only Adam and Eve, but human beings like ourselves, it is when we depart from God in a feeling of independence, needing to have our own way, needing to do something to live life differently from how God would want it, knowing that the tree in the middle of the garden, it is from that tree that represents God's presence and power. It is when we want to take that power into our own hands that we commit the 7 deadly sins, that we have to rush quickly and make a skimpy costume of a loincloth with fig leaves. It is the cover-up, you see, because we will not admit that deep and inherent in Adam and Eve and all of us is that need to rebel. And it is in rebellion that we depart from what God's will really is. So as we are coming close to Lent, I actually was going to make a joke with you at the beginning and say, well, there's no carnival, that's why we are dressed up for Lent. But the thing is, there is a carnival. Not the one that we frown on, not the kind that we frown on, because joy is of the Lord. Celebration comes from the Holy Spirit welling up inside of us. And yes, we need to do things well and not according to the rhythm of the world. So this carnival, we can celebrate remembering the road march comes from the King himself, that the rhythm is from the pace of the Holy Spirit beating in our hearts, breathing with us, to be in sync with the master, music master, the master DJ himself, God, the God of all creation.